the second thing is that it says there should be temporary groups. And in my study, I did not use temporary groups because in real adult literature circles, you usually stay with a group for a long period of time, and it was an adaptation to literature circles that was discussed by the relevant literature. Different groups read different books. The whole idea is students choose their books. Kids use written or drawn notes to guide their reading and discussion. So as kids are reading, they're actually pulling out the things that they're going to discuss. The discussion topics come from the students. So the teacher isn't giving what they want the students to talk about. The students come up with what they want to discuss in their group. And the meeting should be as open and natural as possible. The conversation can become a little bit rote if students are just reading what they wrote down. And you want to encourage students to come out of what they wrote and have an open and natural conversation. And the teacher is more of a facilitator. They are not a member of the literature circle group. And the spirit in the room should be playful and fun. And when the books are finished, there should be some kind of way for the readers to share out what they read. The relevant literature says that reading is a transactional activity, that the meaning takes place between the reader and the text. It's not just in one person's head. So conversation helps the readers to create that meaning. Each reader is going to bring their own emotions, their own concerns, their own experiences. It makes this classroom more student-centered to use literature circles. The students are the facilitators. The students are in charge of what they're going to talk about. And the Vygotsky zone of proximal development shows that working with a peer can help to create more meaning. It's for all types of learners. It can be used with ELLs. It promotes the natural use of language, real conversation, a wide range of cultural perspectives, and is also shown to be effective with students with learning disabilities. Cooperative learning lays the groundwork for inclusion. The quantitative data also shows that literature circles are effective. The test results in numerous studies have shown literature circles to be effective. The methods in this study. It was at Palm Elementary School. There are 667 students there. 45% are ELL. 81% are socially economically disadvantaged. 2.8% African American and 16% white. 74% Hispanic or Latino. Those were the stats in 2011 from the accountability report, so it might have changed a little bit up till now. Participants, there were 27 students involved in this study. 10 were ELL, 5 were early advanced, and 5 were intermediate. And this is kind of the method I used. I introduced the concept using YouTube videos. A recommended technique is the fishbowl technique, where you go into a classroom of somebody who uses it, but I wasn't sure if there was anybody using them, according to Daniels. Daniels is the main guy who was writing about literature circles, using them according to those methods. So I used YouTube videos so I could make sure that it looked the way I wanted it to. I modeled how to complete the different role sheets using a read aloud. The role sheets I used were a vocabulary master, where students sought out unfamiliar words, a connector, where students practiced making those text-to-text, text-to-self, and text-to-world connections, a discussion director, where students came up with the questions they wanted to discuss, and an artful artist, where students practiced making those visualizations. We did a book pass to form groups, and that basically was I took out all of the books I had, and I gave each student a different book, and then they looked at it for 2 minutes to see if it was something they wanted to read. And then after 2 minutes, they wrote down their notes, they passed it to the next person. And they looked at that book and saw if it was something they wanted to read to help students make a choice. I followed this Tuesday through Thursday schedule, sort of. As we know, our schedules get changed around a lot, but I did the best I could to follow the schedule. On Tuesday, we picked a book. Students read independently and started their roles. On Wednesday, they completed their roles and began their discussions. On Thursday, they would complete any discussions and then review the books. They did book review to share the book with the greater world. And I completed this for 3 weeks. And my findings were this. Prior to the reading intervention, I gave a survey, and I asked students which strategies they were using. I asked them if they were making connections, questioning the text, creating mental images, or rereading. And students gave me these responses. The blue here is all of the time, sometimes, not often, never. Now, at the end, I gave the same survey, and the results were wacky. And I realized that the students did not understand the format of my survey. They had to circle a 4 for all the time, a 3, and the first time they just went through it. They're like, "Ooh, fun!" And the second time they started asking questions. They're like, "Well, what does it mean if I circle a 4?" I'm like, "Why are you asking me that now the second time and not the first time?" And what does it mean to question the text? It's like, well, you did this survey before. So my survey, I did not put a lot of weight into it in drawing my conclusions. The next time, if I were to do this again, I would make sure the format was a little more familiar to my students, and I would make sure that any unfamiliar terms were totally clear. So the results there, inconclusive. Had no idea based on their survey what they had learned. So then I took my observations and their work samples. So this is some of the work samples that come from the discussion director. Questions like, what if the tooth fairy didn't do her job? How would you feel if you had to eat what it rained? What do you think about Leo? Why did the queen drop the baby? Would you like to be the tooth fairy? I thought these questions were very telling of what they had learned, that they had learned to question the text. And these were some of the visual, these were some of the artful artists. I thought from reviewing those that they had indeed learned how to visualize. Some work sample, or this was a conversation. Student 8, why do you keep saying that? Why do you keep saying he's in prison? Student 20, look at this picture. It looks like he is in prison. Me. So you made a connection between being in prison and being tangled in vines. Yes, I'm making a connection. So based on my observations, I was more confident to say that students were indeed using more of the strategies than they were in the beginning of the study. Why is she sad here? She's sad because she has to leave. They won't be together anymore. That is really sad, and the whole group's agreeing. I also used the STAR reading test on Accelerated Reader. At the beginning of the intervention, I had them take the test, and at the end, and I found that on the last day of intervention, 18 out of 27 students did make a positive gain in the independent reading level. The average gain was 0.6, which is a considerable gain over 3 weeks. Some students were more, some were less, but that was the average. 4 out of 27 experienced no change at all, and 5 out of 27 had a negative change. Based on that data, I really felt like the intervention was successful because we've all given this test before, and we know that a student can sometimes vary from day to day based on their motivation, whether they want to play Reader Rabbit or Starfall or whatever it is. I felt like that was a success, that the majority of students made positive gains. So, conclusion, positive effect on independent reading. Now, behavior. During literature circles, I noticed that I had to give prompts for inattentive behavior way less often than I had to during the pre-intervention instruction. I just took a tally sheet each day, or took a tally sheet for a day at the beginning of how many times I was redirecting, and a tally sheet at the end of how many times I was redirecting, and I saw a significant difference in behavior. The students also believed that they were on task all of the time, for the most part, pre-intervention. Now, some of them said most of the time post-intervention, but I still felt like they were on task. Some students feel like they don't have permission to talk, and so I felt like maybe some were feeling, I was talking a lot, I wasn't on task. But my observations were that they were on task, and they had reported the same. Positive effect, conclusion. Positive effect on behavior and engagement. As reading as an activity of choice, I had a lot of graphs and charts, but they show no change. Pre and post exactly the same. So I didn't put them in here for you to see because they look exactly the same. There was no change in reading as an activity of choice. I didn't observe students going to the library more often. Students didn't report taking more AR tests. So it didn't change their activity outside of class, but it did, I believe, have a positive effect on reading level and on behavior in class. So are there questions? Andrew? I forgot. Okay. Monica?
I would be curious to see, since you started off by telling us the demographics of your class, I'd be curious to see how many of those English language learners or maybe any kids you had that were on IEPs, how they were able to advance through this.
I did not have any on IEPs in this study. I did not separate out English language learners, but it was a question I had as well. So I think I would agree that would be an interesting other secondary question. Any other questions? So, yes. Kelsey.
You were doing this in free time in class or at
No.
literature time? How were you using it?
I did it during reading intervention. During our core time, we really are not allowed to deviate from the curriculum. And so this was really the only time that I have permission to deviate, so I did it during that time. Yes?
How did you go about choosing which books were the ones that the children were presented with?
I picked some myself when the Scholastic Book Fair came, and I asked some students that were in there, does this look like a good book? Would you want to read that? And then I used what was available in the book room, too. I just kind of, looked through. I saw if it looked like the appropriate level. And I used all picture books because it was only a 3-week study. If I were to do this not as a study in my classroom, I would have used novels for 3rd grade, short novels probably. But I used what looked like the appropriate level of picture books. Went through the book room. Julie?
I'd just be curious, did you have what was the makeup of the groups? Did you have more, all boy groups or mixed groups, and did some do better than others?
Definitely some groups were took a little longer to get used to the routine than others, but it was based on book choice. So, because that's one of the components of a literature circle. So what I did after the book pass, I sat down, I went through all of their preferences, and based on the first book pass, I grouped them according to what their first choice of book was. And so I did end up with some all-boy groups. And I did end up with some groups that had some students who have a harder time staying on task. And I looked at a few of the groups and I said, oh, this is never going to work. But I wanted to trust the process of letting them choose their own books. And I felt that they all, by the end, had the routine down and that they got it. And some groups it was harder for others, though, definitely. Any other questions? All right. My reference page was really long, and so I just said to see me if you would like the references used in my study. I'll be happy to print them for you. And that's it. Thank you.